It was the kind of night that never leaves your memory, the kind of night that brands itself into your soul like a scar you carry in silence. The rain had started hours earlier, but it wasn't just rain. It was thunder crashing like judgment. From the sky, wind that howled like the universe itself was trying to warn someone, and lightning that sliced through the dark like truth, trying to find its way through a lie. Inside a cramped brick house on the edge of a forgotten neighborhood, 16-year-old Marcus Daniel stood frozen in the center of the living room, his chest heaving as he tried to find words, but there were none left. "You're not my son anymore." His father's voice rang through the room like a gunshot. Pastor Thomas Daniels had always been a strict man, a man of God, a man of rules carved into stone. But tonight, there was something else in his voice: rage, yes, but also fear. Fear of what people would say. Fear of losing control. Fear that the image he had worked so hard to build, devoted father, spiritual leader, respectable man, was crumbling because of the boy who stood in front of him. Marcus's hands were shaking, not because he was afraid of being hit. His father had never raised a hand to him, but because the thing he feared most was already happening: rejection, condemnation, abandonment. He had come out to them that afternoon, not angrily, not defiantly, but trembling and honest. He had spoken the truth about who he was. He had finally let out the words that had sat like stones in his chest for years. And the result? His father had thrown his Bible across the room and told him to pack his things. "You can't stay here." His mother whispered now. She didn't look at him. Her eyes were glued to the floor, and her hands trembled as they clutched the hem of her apron like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "We have a reputation. Your father, this will kill him. You know what the church will say." "The church?" Marcus said, his voice cracking. "What about your son?" Silence, that brutal, cold silence that says everything. In the corner, 8-year-old Aaliyah peeked out from behind the hallway wall, clutching her teddy bear, her big eyes swimming with confusion and tears. She didn't understand what was happening, but she could feel the air shift, feel the center of there. Home split open, and Marcus saw it then, in her eyes, fear that this was goodbye. He looked around the room, every photo on the wall, every Sunday school trophy, every family memory now felt like a lie. And as he zipped up the only duffel bag he owned, he realized that this house had never truly been his. It had always been conditional, love with terms, family with exceptions. And now, because he had chosen honesty, he was being exiled. The door opened. Cold air rushed in like a final slap. He stepped onto the porch. For a brief second, he hesitated. Maybe his mother would call out. Maybe his father would say he didn't mean it. Maybe someone would break. But no one did. The door slowly closed behind him. Not slammed, not locked, just closed. Like a page in a book. Marcus stood in the rain for a while, soaked to the bone, not knowing where to go. He had no car, no job, no money. Just a phone with 13% battery, a cracked screen, and a contact list filled with names he couldn't trust. Every breath he took hurt like fire in his lungs. He walked aimlessly for hours, past the church he used to sing in, past the park where he and Aaliyah used to feed ducks, past the liquor store where his father once warned him only broken men go there. It was ironic. Now he was one of them. Eventually, he found shelter in the back of a bus station, where the heater barely worked and the lights flickered overhead like they were as tired as he was. He curled up on a bench, the smell of wet floors and old rubber overwhelming. He didn't cry, not yet. He just stared at the ceiling, replaying every word his father said. "You're not my son anymore." That sentence didn't echo in his mind. It echoed in his soul. It carved itself into his memory like a cruel tattoo he could never remove. And yet, somewhere deep beneath the heartbreak, a tiny ember still burned. It whispered something to him, soft but relentless. "You will not be forgotten. You will not be worthless." You will rise. The first week on the streets was a lesson in invisibility. Marcus learned quickly that when you're young, black, and homeless, the world doesn't just ignore you, it actively avoids you. People crossed the street when they saw him. Store owners watched him like a threat. Even bus drivers hesitated when he stepped onto the platform, always asking, "You paying or just riding to stay warm?" He didn't blame them. How could he? They saw what they wanted to see. A broken kid in dirty clothes, probably up to no good. No one knew the truth, and no one asked. That he once got straight A's, that he had dreams of attending YU for music, that he had once led the youth choir on Christmas Eve, standing in front of a packed church, his voice full of hope and possibility. No, none of that mattered now. He had become a ghost in a world obsessed with appearances. Marcus spent his nights wherever he could. Some nights, it was a 24-hour laundromat with plastic chairs that dug into his back. Other nights, it was a church basement, though never his church. He couldn't bring himself to walk past it anymore. It stood like a monument to everything. That broke him. He slept once under an overpass with a group of runaways and addicts. A girl named Star shared half a sandwich with him and told him she'd been out here since she was 13. "You gotta keep your shoes on when you sleep," she said. "People steal them right off your feet." During the day, Marcus wandered. He searched for work, begged for food when his pride finally broke, and sometimes, when the ache of hunger blurred his vision, he sang. Just stood on the sidewalk and sang the songs he remembered from church. It didn't bring much. A few coins. A few odd looks. But one day, something different happened. A man named Elijah Harris heard him singing near the subway entrance. Elijah was a former music teacher, now working at a nonprofit art center downtown. He didn't say much at first. Just slipped Marcus a $10 bill and a business card. "You've got pain in your voice," he said, "but also power. Come. See me when you're ready." Marcus stared at the card for 3 days before finally walking into the center. It was a modest building with scuffed floors and cracked walls, but inside, it felt like light. There were instruments, guitars, pianos, a drum set, even a small studio booth. Elijah was waiting. "Tell me your story," he said. Marcus didn't wanna. Not yet, but somehow, when he sat in that studio chair with headphones on and a mic in front of him, the story just came pouring out, not in words, but in melody. He sang about betrayal, about the night the door closed, about his mother's silence and his father's rage, about sleeping in the cold and being watched like he was a criminal when all he wanted was a chance. Elijah didn't stop him. He let the song go until Marcus was hoarse, until the weight he carried finally began to melt just a little. From that day forward, things changed. Not fast, but steadily. Elijah helped him get a part-time job cleaning the center. In return, Marcus got access to the studio. He spent hours there writing, singing, crying sometimes. Music became his medicine, his refuge, his home dock, but he didn't forget. No matter how far he climbed, he didn't forget the night it all began. Every beat he made, every lyric he wrote, carried the fingerprints of his pain. He was building something. Now slowly, quietly, but he made himself a promise. One day, I'll walk back through that door. Not as the broken boy they threw away, but as the man they never saw coming. 12 years had passed. 12 winters. 12 birthdays spent alone. 12 Christmases where the only gift Marcus received was silence. Silence from his family, silence from the past, silence from the place that once called itself home. He was 28 now. Older, wiser, but still carrying pieces of that 16-year-old boy inside him. Pieces that never healed right. On the outside, the world saw success. His music had taken off quietly, like a whisper that turned into a wave. He never became a mainstream pop star, but in certain circles, Marcus Daniels was a name that meant something. Raw, unfiltered, real. His eps told stories no one wanted to say out loud about abandonment, identity, faith, and the wounds left by those who claimed to love us the most. He had toured 5 countries, had 3 songs featured in independent films, and even did a TED Talk once about the power of being seen. But none of it erased that ache. The one that surfaced late at night when the applause faded. The ache that still asked the same quiet question: why wasn't I enough for them? To love? That question never fully went away. Even now, as he stood outside the same brick house on the same broken street where it all began, his fingers trembled just like they had 12 years earlier. He hadn't told anyone he was coming, not his manager, not Elijah, not even his closest friend, Darian, who had walked beside him through nearly every season of growth and grief. This moment wasn't for the public. It wasn't for social media. It was for the boy who stood in the rain with a duffel bag and no goodbye. The neighborhood hadn't changed much. Maybe a new coat of paint here and there, a few houses boarded up. The church still stood tall at the corner, its steeple casting a long, familiar shadow. He couldn't bring himself to look at it for long. Marcus took a breath that felt like it scraped the inside of his chest. He stepped up to the porch, the same creaky wooden steps that had once carried him out into the unknown. The same porch where his father had said those final words, "You're not my son anymore." His hand hovered above the doorbell. He didn't know who would answer. His parents? Maybe his sister? Would they even recognize him? Would they slam the door again? Would they cry? Would they pretend nothing had ever happened? He pressed the button. A long pause, footsteps, the sound of a deadbolt turning. And then, the door opened. It wasn't his father. It was Aaliyah. She had grown. Of course she had. The little girl with the teddy bear was now a young woman, maybe 20, dressed in scrubs, her hair tied back. Tired eyes widened with shock as she stared at the man in front of her. Marcus? His name. After all these years, hearing it come from someone in that house, it shattered him. He tried to smile, but his lips betrayed him, trembling like they remembered the last time they'd touched this doorstep. "Aaliyah," he whispered, voice cracking. "Hey, little sis." She didn't hesitate. She threw her arms around him, and for the first time in over a decade, he felt the warmth of family, not manufactured, not forced, but real. She held him like she was trying to protect him from everything that had already happened, like she was trying to pull back the years that had stolen so much. Inside, the house still smelled like lemon polish and old books. The furniture was mostly the same, just older, quieter. The walls were still lined with family photos, but none of Marcus. It stung, but he understood. He had been erased. "I've been looking for you," Aaliyah said softly, "for years. I found your music online, and I knew it was you. I just didn't know if you'd ever come back." He nodded slowly. "I wasn't ready, until now." Then, a voice came from the hallway. Low, cautious, familiar. "Who's at the door?" His mother. She stepped into view slowly, and when her eyes met his, something in her collapsed. The color drained from her face. Her hands went to her mouth, and for a moment, she didn't breathe. Then she whispered the name that had never been spoken in that house since the day he left. "Marcus." He nodded, trying to keep his tears at bay. "Hi, Mama." She stumbled forward as if her legs couldn't decide whether to run or kneel. And then she did what he never expected. She hugged him, hard, sobbing against his chest, repeating "I'm sorry" over and over like a broken prayer. He stood still, letting her grief wash over him, letting her regrets soak through the years of silence. He didn't say anything, not yet, because this moment wasn't about words. It was about presence. It was about survival. It was about returning. And as he stood there, arms around the woman who once turned her back, a question formed. In his heart, not bitter, not vengeful, but honest. What would his father say if he walked in right now? Marcus would soon find out. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. Each second stretched like an eternity as Marcus sat in the living room of the house that once spit him out like he was a disease. His mother had stepped into the kitchen to compose herself, tears still slipping down her cheeks as she wiped her hands on a dish rag that couldn't wipe away the guilt of 12 years. Elia sat beside Marcus, their knees touching on the edge of the couch, two siblings who had been divided by silence, now reunited by something deeper than blood, truth. She didn't say much, just held his hand like she was afraid he would vanish again. And then came the sound. Heavy boots on hardwood floors, slow, steady. Familiar. Marcus didn't need to look. He knew it. He could feel it in the floor, in the breathlessness of the room, in the way of his own heartbeat. His father was home. Pastor Thomas Daniel stepped into the doorway. He had aged hair now streaked with gray, shoulders slightly hunched, his once commanding presence dimmed, but not extinguished. But his eyes, those eyes hadn't changed. They were still hard, like stone behind glass. Eyes that judged before they understood. Eyes that had once looked at Marcus like he was something shameful. He stopped short when he saw him. There was a silence so thick it sucked the oxygen from the room. Marcus stood slowly, not out of fear, not out of reverence, but because he needed to meet his father on his feet, eye to eye, not as the wounded boy, but as the man who survived. "Dad," he said. Thomas blinked. A flicker of something crossed his face: recognition, confusion, and then the defense of old pride. "What are you doing here?" His voice was hoarse, cautious, like he already feared the answer. "I came back," Marcus said softly. 12 years. No word, no letter, no phone call. "I thought maybe you'd want to see what became of the son you kicked out." Thomas stepped further into the room, his jaw clenched. "You made your choice back then." "No," Marcus replied, steady but trembling. "I made peace with who I am. You made the choice to send me into the cold for it." The silence returned. His mother peeked in from the kitchen, eyes wide and brimming. Elia whispered, "Please, just talk." But Thomas didn't talk. He stared, and then he turned. He started to walk away, and that was when Marcus did something no one expected. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to a track, and pressed play. The music filled the room like a tied gentle piano chords, soft strings in the background, and then his voice, not shouting, not angry, but aching. The song he had written in a bus station. The first one he recorded in Elijah's studio. The song called "Closed Door." The lyrics spoke of a boy soaked in rain, staring at a house that no longer claimed him. Of a father's final words echoing through the years. Of hunger, of wandering, of strangers with kinder eyes than his own kin. Of pain, but also of hope. The last verse was new, added only months ago. It told of a man returning, not to beg, not to curse, but to stand. To remind the world that rejection does not define worth. That love, real love, doesn't come with conditions. Thomas froze in the hallway, his back still turned. But then, slowly, he sat down. The song played to its end, and the room was silent again. Only this time, it was different. It wasn't the silence of shame or judgment. It was the silence of reckoning. "I listened to your voice," Thomas finally said, barely above a whisper. "On the news, on the internet, on the radio. I always knew it was you. I didn't know how to face you." Marcus's heart thudded. "You let the world hear me," he said, "but never once called to say you did." Thomas looked up, and for the first time in Marcus's life, there were tears in his father's eyes. "I was wrong," he said. Marcus blinked. "I was afraid," Thomas continued, his voice breaking. "Afraid of what people would think. Afraid the church would turn on me. Afraid you'd ruin everything I worked for. But I ruined it myself. I let fear lead me. And I lost my son." Marcus couldn't move. His breath hitched in his throat. I don't expect forgiveness, Thomas added. I don't deserve it, but I need you to know. Not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about you, prayed for you, wanted you to walk back through that door. A long silence passed between them, one filled with the weight of years. And then Marcus said the one thing that truly stunned everyone in that house. I already forgave you. A long time ago. But I couldn't come back until I forgave myself too. His voice cracked. Because for a long time, I thought maybe you were right. Maybe I was unworthy. Maybe love was something I had to earn. He looked at his father, eyes burning with pain and peace. But I know now. I was always worthy. I just needed to see it first. A sob escaped from his mother. Aaliyah buried her face in her hands. And Thomas, strong, hard, prideful Thomas, stood up, walked to his son, and wrapped his arms around him, not as a pastor, not as a man clinging to his reputation, but as a father, a broken one, a late one, but a father nonetheless. That night, they sat together on the kitchen table. Aaliyah made tea. Their mother cooked cornbread like it was 2009 again, and Marcus? He sang softly under his breath. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. 12 years ago, they closed the door on him. Now it was open, and it would never close again.